Politico stands at the intersection of politics, policy, and power, delivering the stories that matter. Politico covers the moments that shape the world, connecting decision makers and driving dialogue.
Politico means passion,
people-powered,
impactful,
determined,
provocation,
persistence, unbeatable,
optimistic,
trusted, disruptive.
powerful journalism.
Our journalism is built for you, the thinkers, the change makers, the leaders. We inform, we provoke, we persist. Politico doesn't just follow the news, it drives the conversation. Tonight, we shine a light on Europe's most powerful people, the doers, the dreamers, and the disruptors. Welcome to Politico 28.
Good evening, heads of state and government, excellencies, commissioners, members of parliament, ladies and gentlemen, friends. Thank you very much for joining us at what has become the most significant social event on the Brussels calendar, indisputably. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Jamil Andolini. I'm the editor-in-chief of Politico in Europe. When I arrived here a few years ago, I was surprised by the paucity of events such as this. And so we in Politico have been very busy over the last couple of years creating the social event of the Brussels calendar. I'd like to formally welcome you to our Politico 28 Gala Dinner. For those of you who aren't as familiar with P28, I want to be totally clear that this is not an awards ceremony. It is not intended as an endorsement or an accolade. Every autumn, our journalists consult with sources, with experts, and power players across Europe to prepare a list of the most powerful people that we believe will be shaping Europe and its politics and policy over the coming year. We name people in three main categories: the doers, the dreamers, and the disruptors. And finally, we reveal the person we predict will be the overall most powerful person in Europe in 2025. As you can imagine, compiling this list every year is one of the most fraught exercises that we go through in our newsroom, especially in a year like 2024 with so many elections. These elections have shifted the balance of power and forced us to constantly question the status quo. To tell us more about how Politico is seizing this moment, please join me in welcoming Goli Sheikh-el-Islami, the CEO of Politico.
Good evening, everyone. It is such a pleasure to be in Brussels and to be here for my third P28. For those of you whom I've not had the pleasure of meeting, I'm Goli Sheikh-el-Islami, the CEO of Politico. We're here tonight to recognize the doers, dreamers, and disruptors poised to shape Europe in 2025. Shortly, you'll hear more from my colleagues about the individuals who we believe best fit these categories. This year marks the 10th edition of the Politico 28 list, reflecting a decade of reporting on Europe's shifting power dynamics and the individuals who have driven that change. We gather tonight at a pivotal moment for Europe and for the world, a moment in which power, how it is perceived and how it is wielded, carries a heavier weight. Last year when we were together, we knew that 2024 could bring seismic shifts with elections being held in more than 100 countries around the world, including 8 of the world's 10 most populous nations. One of the final elections of 2024 resulted in Donald Trump's return to office with a promise to upend power structures in the United States and reshape political conversations around the world. As we have seen with the successes of Donald Trump, Keir Starmer, and many others, economic policy has been a primary driver of upheaval at the ballot box, and soon the future direction of Europe's largest democracy will also be decided. The world has entered an era of profound uncertainty. Alliances and institutions that have underpinned global stability since the end of World War II now face existential challenges to their legitimacy and relevance. These bedrocks of the international order are being tested as never before, raising urgent questions about their capacity to endure, adapt, and respond to the relentless pressures of a rapidly changing geopolitical landscape. Will they weather the gales of political and societal change, or will they be reshaped into entirely new forms? The answers will have implications from the future of global stability to the trajectory of critical issues like Putin's war in Ukraine. In times like these, understanding the motivations and decisions of those who wield power has never been more critical. It is through this lens that we grasp the stakes of the moment and anticipate the path forward. Moments of such magnitude reaffirm Politico's original mission: to illuminate the complexities of this political era, to unravel the policies that will define it, and to tell the stories that connect power to people. In doing so, we aim not only to inform, but to empower, ensuring that the political decisions saving our future are understood and scrutinized by all. Today, Politico's coverage spans 9 time zones. We are a transatlantic publication, but we remain firmly rooted in our local centers of power, like the one we gather in tonight. We immerse readers in the conversations rippling through political villages, translating your work, shaping generational policy to citizens and institutions across the world. And while we will spend much of this evening focused on those who hold power, we are also here to celebrate the power of quality journalism and a free press. At its core, journalism is more than just the first draft of history. It is a cornerstone of democracy. It is the means by which power is held accountable, voices are amplified, and truths are unearthed. In moments of uncertainty and upheaval, the role of a free press becomes even more vital, acting as both a mirror and a guide for society. At Politico, we deeply believe in the power of journalism to inform, inspire, and uphold the values that bind us together. It is our shared responsibility to ensure that this essential work continues, to safeguard the pursuit of truth, and to shine a light even in the darkest corners. This belief fuels everything we do, and it is what brings us together tonight. So I'd like to end by thanking all of you for supporting our vital work. And with that, I'd like to welcome Jamil back to the stage to continue our evening's programming. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Colleen. So now we're going to move straight into the main event, which is the Politico 28 list. We're starting with the doer category, and to introduce this year's top doer and our first special guest of the evening, I'd like to invite Aitor Hernandez Morales, our senior Politico reporter, who was responsible for curating this year's P28 list on behalf of our newsroom.
Good evening. The doers on our Politico 28 list are typically those who are most adept at imposing their will. Their decisions move markets, policies, and societies, and their indecision can cause chaos, confusion, and the perception of complacency. Earlier today, we revealed the names of the doers who we believe will shape 2025. One of them is someone that you'll hear from in just one moment. But for now, let's turn our eyes to the screen as we reveal our top Politico 28 doer for 2025.
2024 has been ripe with power shifts across Europe, but one leader has managed to firmly keep their seat at the head of the table. They weren't always the obvious choice to be where they are now, but in the span of a few years, this person has redefined what was once dismissed as a bureaucratic role into one of unprecedented political power. With leaders in Berlin and Paris able to exert their traditional dominance of the continent's political scene, this person has become the stable voice of reason, steering Europe through unprecedented crises. Their path forward is promising, though not without obstacles. If Europe wants to compete in the global pecking order and keep enemy armies at bay, they'll have to pull out all the stops to meet the moment. In 2025, it's all eyes on her. This is Ursula von der Leyen, the European Commission President, this year's top doer on our Politico 28 list for 2025.
So, now let's continue our conversation on what it means to be a doer in today's geopolitical landscape. Nadia Calviño, one of our 2025 doers on this year's list, is currently president of the European Investment Bank, the world's biggest multilateral lender. She made the cut for this year's list because, in many ways, she is the money. She, from her post, will have to funnel cash to Europe's most strategic sectors, defense, tech, and others, and ultimately make the EU more competitive. And it's a job that she's well prepared to do. She's an accomplished economist, a Brussels veteran, and a longtime Deputy Prime Minister of Spain. So without further ado, Nadia Calviño, please join us on the stage. So I just want to start by pointing out that you are the fourth Iberian who is on our list, and you happen to have the distinction of having served in a government with two other people on the list. That's Spanish Prime Minister Pedro Sánchez and the incoming Commissioner for Competition, Teresa Rivera. So quite a cohort that you were part of.
Yes, indeed. I'm very glad that finally Spain is punching its weight, as represented here in the Politico highlights, for next year. And I think it does reflect the fact that I have been, and I'm honored to say that, a part of a very pro-European government that did a very good job in responding to the pandemic and doing the necessary reforms to have a fast-growing economy, and also to shape Europe's policies in this regard. So I hope that that continues to be a trend, that every year there are at least 3 Spanish on the list.
Fingers crossed. President Calviño, I want to start out by asking about the role that you see the EIB playing in one of the most important sectors for Europe right now, which is obviously the defense industry. How much money do you believe is needed, and where do you see it coming from?
Well, I think there's unanimous agreement on the fact that Europe needs to activate 2 levers if we want to continue to be competitive and have a strong voice in this world, which is changing, so much. So first, to deepen the internal market, so to remove barriers and make sure that we have a strong, large internal market where companies can thrive. And then secondly, that we have to mobilize large volumes of investment, public and private investment. So I was not surprised when you said, the EIB has to play a very important role in mobilizing this investment in very different areas. I would like to start by highlighting we really want to consolidate our role as the climate bank. Mm-hmm. We want to support tech, in Europe and make sure that Europe, which is a technological powerhouse, continues to also grow and lead in the sectors of the future. And then, of course, security and defense. From day one when I took this job, I realized we needed to step up our game and support Europe's security and defense industry. Actually, I can tell you tomorrow on our board, I expect that we will have the approval to launch a dedicated €1 billion program to support Europe's SMEs, not only with intermediated finance, but also with a new, a novel guarantee for the value chain and the supply chain financing. So we are really walking the talk. From January, we have been increasing the instruments we have to support this industry. And unfortunately, I want to say, because for the past 80 years we have really benefited from the dividends of peace, but it is quite clear we need to really reinforce our ability to preserve peace in Europe and beyond.
Let me ask you, because I know that a lot of the EIB's efforts obviously involve teaming up with the private sector. When we're talking about a sector like defense, how do you get private investors to come up, to feel confident that they won't run into any reputational risks, especially in a sector that historically has been considered problematic for some of these investors?
I think the atmosphere in the investment community and the financial sector is changing. Nevertheless, it is quite clear that an investment bank, as a European investment bank, we're very well placed to support dual-use technologies. And this is a broad array of very important projects for Europe, from border protection, military mobility, drones, cybersecurity, space. Actually, we have already invested in some satellite programs. So dual use is a broad concept which is very well understood by financial markets. We have been doing testing the market, and they understand what we want to do, and they see the value added.
Okay, and the determination is to continue with that dual use approach?
As I was saying, you know, this covers most of what Europe needs to be investing into. I mean, the European Investment Bank is not a defense ministry, and so each of us should play our role.
Okay, that makes total sense. And finally, I wanted to ask you, in the very transatlantic spirit of Politico, how do you see the EIB playing a role in a relationship with the US that will likely involve, for example, tariffs and other sorts of economic turmoil?
Well, I mean, the whole night is going to be discussing what can we expect, and I think that what we can certainly expect is that there will be radical changes in the way we interact with our closest partner on the other side of the Atlantic. This transatlantic relations is a priority, it's really strategic for Europe, and so we really have to prepare for that. But it's very cold out there these days when you look around and the changes that are taking place in the global order. So we Europeans, we need to stick together, keep the course, you know, act in a coherent manner, all hands on deck. The doers, we play an important role, and I think you really got it right by saying I am a doer. And work hard to make sure that Europe continues to thrive, to deliver the promise of prosperity to future generations and have a strong voice in the world.
Are you confident that you can deliver, for example, on that objective that was laid out in the famous Draghi report? Are you confident that Europe can really get to the point where it is a competitive player on the global market?
I think we have a very strong basis, and sometimes we're not really aware of our strengths. We have excellent universities, very good and very performant startups, research centers. We really are a technology powerhouse and a trade powerhouse. We have a strong basis on which to build. Now we know what needs to be done. Let's do it.
Excellent. Well, President Calviño, I want to thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you again. A ti. Te quedo con esto. And now I'd like to welcome Jamil back on the stage.
Thank you very much, Aitor and President Calviño. So those are the doers, the first of our 4 categories. Later this evening, we'll reveal more categories and continue our discussions. But before we do, I'd like to introduce you to the General Catalyst Institute, one of our first 2 presenting partners, without whom tonight would not be possible.
No challenge is too big for us to take on, and I think that's just demonstrated by the industries that we invest in. My name's Teresa Carlson, and I'm the president of General Catalyst Institute. The General Catalyst Institute is a global organization that works with governments around the world to help shape policies that are driven towards startups. Our mission of the General Catalyst Institute is to promote global and national resilience by backing the most transformative technology companies and shaping public policy to drive societal good and societal change. At General Catalyst, we're disrupting venture capital in a few ways, bringing capital, public policy, and business together. The other thing that we're doing is really teaching and training and skills with our startups on how do they interact with government. That's a very different and new thing that most VCs have never done or thought of. It's about deeply collaborating with policymakers. We're hearing what governments have to say because we need to understand the challenges that we're facing and we need to bring solutions to the table. We know those things don't happen overnight. We're rolling up our sleeves, we're diving in, we want to do this.
So now I'm going to ask Teresa to come to the stage. Please welcome her with me.
Well, good evening, everyone. I'm sorry you're having to see me twice. You had to see me up there, now you have to see me again. But I just want to say it's so amazing to be here with all of these inspiring leaders. The General Catalyst Institute, as we've had a couple of amazing days meeting with government leaders and really hearing from you about the inspiring work that you're doing. And for those of you who don't know who we are, General Catalyst is one of the world's largest venture capital firms, and we're doing things just a little bit differently in venture capital. We like to call ourselves a transformative technology company, and we're working to cultivate both builders and entrepreneurs and transform the entire sector and industries globally. So we are, again, I can't tell you how excited we are, and we're doing three things that we think we bring to the European market. One is we're investing locally, and we're making sure that we're building these companies locally. So we're excited to have invested over 800 companies, many companies in Europe, and we hear you when you say we want these companies homegrown and growing off of the backbone of the opportunities within Europe. So I think General Catalyst brings really four things to the table. One is we bring capital. Two, we bring the ability to help the companies scale and grow. And then lastly, with the General Catalyst Institute, we actually work proactively with governments to actually bring the great policies and work, again, collaboratively. Not just kind of say, hey, government, you're not doing it right, but what can we bring that really helps government understand the right policies to help scale? I am so glad you guys are having a great time. Goalie is clearly putting on a fantastic show. Thank you to Politico. Thank you for having the General Catalyst Institute, and we're glad here to be here and sponsor it. You guys have a great evening. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Teresa. And now we'd like to invite our other presenting partner, Turner, to play a video and then come and give some remarks while you are quiet and listen to the remarks. Thank you very much.
The electricity grid is paving the way to achieve Europe's ambitious decarbonization goals. In Italy, Terna has a central role enabling the transition to renewable sources. Our mission is to guarantee energy security and balance electricity supply and demand 24 hours a day, while developing an electricity grid that can integrate energy from renewable sources. The electricity system is transitioning from a centralized model to an integrated and widespread one. In 2000, Terna managed energy from around 800 power stations into the grid. Today, there are more than 1.5 million electricity production plants in Italy. Our work improves links between different areas of the country and strengthens cross-border interconnections. To support and accelerate the country's energy transition, grid development requires significant growth in the use of digital technologies. Our wider vision is that a twin transition, energy and digital, will ensure a faster, sustainable, just, and inclusive transition for all.
And now I would like to ask David Massey from Turner to come and give some remarks while your famous European civility allows you to pay attention. Thank you.
Hi. Thank you. Good evening. I'll be brief. As you can see from the video, we are doers. I like the categories of Politico. We are doers. Just look at the network, look at what we do. But we are dreamers. We also have to imagine what the future could look like. What will our energy needs be in 2030, 2040, 2050? But I also like the category disruptors, because we can't simply keep on adding renewables to the grid or building pylons. and cables. You need to think about energy in a different way. So what might be another way to think about energy? Well, Mario Draghi would say we need a collective effort to innovate. We need to massively accelerate investment in innovation to be competitive with the US or with China. Steve Jobs also talked a lot about innovation. And he said you can't do it on your own. Great business people innovate together, collectively. Let me give you an example of that. At 18:37 this evening, I received one of those emergency messages about energy. Tomorrow, apparently, Terna has to pump 20,000 megawatts towards other countries in Europe. We live and survive on our interconnectedness. And as a Brit, I'm allowed to say that because I'm not in the club anymore. As you came in, you may have seen a Terna stand, which with virtual reality, you can see how a TSO operates. Now, if you ask my mother what a TSO does, she doesn't know. All she knows is the electricity bill. We need to teach young people what we do because we need them in the future. We don't just manage 700 power stations connected to the grid like 20 years ago. We manage, do you know how many? Over 1,700,000 connections. It's a bit more complex. Last week, I went to my son's open day at school. He has to choose which school he's going to go to. He's going to go to a scientific school. I'm really pleased because I studied literature. Not very helpful. Really nice, but not very helpful. It said on the board in the room, why do you need to study Latin at a scientific school? I loved that question. My son wasn't so impressed. But as we compete for STEM engineers, as we compete for the mathematicians and the statisticians, we need to think also about the value of things like Latin, the root of so much that we learn about and what we do. And after 32 years in Italy, I can certainly say that. So to close, with education, with our young people, to disrupt, to dream, and to do, we need to do what W.B. Yeats said, don't fill a bucket, light a fire. From Terna, thank you very much. Enjoy your evening. Thank you.
Thank you very much, David. Thanks again to our presenting partners for this year's Politico 28. Coming up later this evening, our top dreamer, our top disruptor, and Europe's most powerful person will be revealed. We might have a few other surprises in there for you, in addition to some other special guests. But for now, please enjoy your meal. Thank you.